everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Book Bites. And I am so thrilled to welcome Rhianna King to the stage, as it may be. Hi, Rhianna. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're going to talk about your book, Birds of a Feather, which I finished last night, and it was a fabulous read. And for those of you who don't know the drill, here on Book Bites, if you leave a comment or ask a question, whether that's here during the live or even if you are watching this back afterwards, you will go into the draw to win a copy of Rhianna's book, which is a really heartwarming read, and it kind of made me feel all gooey as I read it, which was really nice. So thank you very much for that, Rhianna. We're going to talk about connections that are old and new during our chat today, because the thing that struck me when I was reading Birds of a Feather was that there are so many beautiful connections in your novel, and I'm going to try to talk about a few of them. But I wanted to start firstly with the one that probably touched my heart the most. It was just such a beautiful connection, and that's between the two protagonists. Beth, who is the granddaughter, and Elise, who is the grandmother, and they have the most gorgeous relationship. And I wanted to ask you what you think it is about those intergenerational connections that make it so special.
Yeah, and I was so blessed to have two incredible grandmothers. So that's really where the inspiration for the story came from. But actually, if I take a little step back, I started writing the book during COVID. So I live in Melbourne. So we were locked down for, at times 23 hours of the day and living in our little household. And one of the things that I just realized that I had absolutely taken for granted for my whole life was connections with other people. And it's the casual interactions that you have on the street, or it's the sort of catch up with friends and family. And so I was really mindful that my grandmothers are both long past, but it was having the sort of intergenerational layers around you that I really missed so much during that time. But my grandmothers were both born in the 20s, so women that were of a very different time to where I grew up now. And I think, to answer your question, what is so special about the grandparent grandchild relationship is that they just do all the fun stuff. There's none of that kind of sensible parenting thing. I watch my parents come over, and I watch my mother-in-law with the kids, and they spoil them with things that parents would tut about. And I just think yeah, that's right. And I think my mum's even said to me that having a grandchild is the reward for not killing your own children. And so it's and certainly I'm sure there was probably some periods with me that she's got some pretty good grandchildren, so that's a nice reward for the years. But yeah, I just think it's it's just that there's the all love and no responsibility. And I think that was really the inspiration for that relationship between the two protagonists in my book.
Yeah, it's a gentle, kind, loving relationship. And I wonder if it's because that they are both in different ways kind of outliers. Beth doesn't really fit in, for want of a better word, with the rest of her family, her sister, her brother, and her parents. She's a lot more sensible, whereas they're a bit more, free and easy. And Elise also not knowingly to the other members of the family, was a bit of an outlier. And we're going to come to that in just a moment. So do you think that's the thing that connected them to the most?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think, Elise was a woman who was university educated. She was in the STEM. She was an environmental scientist in her own right. She was, she followed, a career path that was quite atypical for women of her age, but also Beth kind of followed in those footsteps. She also loved the natural environment. She got into sciences herself. And so, yeah, like you say, where the rest of the family is into, art and music and woo-woo theories and things like that, these two women really had that shared experience and the shared interest. And I think that was definitely a unifier for the two of them, and certainly a bond. And just, not feeling like you fit in, and like you don't fit in your family or your life or societal expectations. So yeah, definitely, I think that was definitely a bonder for them. There was an unspoken understanding, I think, between them.
Yeah, it comes through so clearly throughout the novel. So got a couple of hellos. Janet, hi Janet, lovely to see you here. And Helen, hi Helen, lovely to see you here. Yvonne is one of our regulars. So are Helen and Janet. Good afternoon. She saw this book in the library this week. She already had 5 books, so she'll get it. Definitely do get it next time. Yeah, it gets a bit heavy, doesn't it, carrying books. Yvonne's also left a comment that she minded her grandchildren for years when they were babies, and she misses those days now that they're grown up.
Yeah.
Oh, so sweet. My daughter wasn't fortunate enough to have her grandparents nearby when she was little, so we missed out on that. But that is something that happens a lot these days, the grandparents looking after
definitely
children. Beth wins the lotto in this story, which is, and it's not a spoiler, that happens at the very beginning, everybody. And I'm going to ask a question about that a little bit later towards the end of our chat today. But one of the things that she does with her winnings is that she decides to help Elise connect with her first love, who is back in London. And before we talk about Elise and Jerry, I wanted to ask you, why was it that Beth chose Elise to bestow this gift on and not her mum or her dad or her sister or her brother?
Yeah, I think it was an interesting process actually in writing the book to look at, the division of a gift like that. And so if you win money, what does it mean? Who do you give it to? Do you tell people? Do you, and I think she was probably keen to find a way of thanking Elise for the relationship that they had. I think, where money is no object, you just want to see somebody happy, and you just, when they're such an important person to you, you just want to kind of do what you can to, perhaps resolve questions of the past for them, or, and I suppose, even though Beth is not necessarily bold in her own life, I think in a way she was almost living a little bit vicariously through emboldening her grandmother to go and pursue this this journey that, to kind of resolve questions of the past. So I think that's probably the reason.
Yeah, because Beth is quite a structured person. Likes things done a certain way. She's quite routine in everything that she does. Whereas, as we've touched on, the rest of her family are a lot more free-spirited than she is. So, it was a chance for her, I guess, to explore that safely in a way.
Yeah, that's right. A bit kind of one step removed. So, the consequences are not your own, as for somebody else.
Now, as we said, Elise wants to reconnect, I should say, with her very first love, Jerry, who she fell in love with when they were at university, which was back in the 1950s. And their same-sex relationship was obviously taboo at that time, and they went their separate ways after university. And we won't go into any spoilers on that and whether they do reconnect or not, because that's part of the journey of the story. But I guess I wanted to ask, so it's about 60 years, I think it is, between when they last saw each other and this lotto-funded trip to London. What sort of pitfalls do you think there would be in trying to reconnect after 60 years? And I have a follow-up question after that.
Okay. I mean, I guess, there's a few logistical things, given their age, that it was always a possibility that, that Jerry was no longer going to be around. And I think, people change and people move on and people forget. And, it was always going to be a risk for Elise that if she did find Jerry, how hurtful it would have been for her if she didn't remember her in the same way. So that's a risk as well. But, and I guess actually in writing the book too, there are a couple of times that I questioned, would you remember the love of 60 years ago? Is that something that you would actually, is this plausible in a storyline? And then, I think it is, I think, that sort of first love is etched into your heart in a way that, you do remember. And I suppose because it was also a same-sex relationship, there would have been other kind of emotions associated with that. And so, I think it's just, the risks of not having that reciprocated, I think, would have probably been hard. But then obviously, you know, societal attitudes towards the LGBTQI community have changed so much. But, you know, and you know, I'm not a member of that community myself, so I'm very careful not to sort of speak on behalf of the community, because, you know, these are not my stories to tell, although I've fictionalized that storyline. But you know, it would be really challenging to have had a situation in a relationship where you are, you know, so bound by these conditions and by these expectations and things, and then what happens when those conditions and expectations don't exist anymore for you, and are you able to shed those just as society had? So I really was keen to sort of explore those themes as well, about how it must feel for, you know, older members of that community to kind of break free of the shackles, because we take a lot of that stuff on ourselves and sort of internalize. So, you know, it's not as easy as just, you know, opening up an old, you know, chapter in your life and picking it up as though it was yesterday. So yeah, that was some of the things I was keen to explore.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think that would be, you know, if I were to go back to my first love, that would be the thing I'd be like, what if he doesn't even remember me? Not just doesn't remember me that way, but what if he doesn't remember me at all? And at the end of the day, regardless of what community you might be a part of, you're dealing with a human being in their heart, aren't you? So that would, I don't think I'd be game enough to do. Or maybe the age of, she's 80 something, isn't she?
Yeah, 82.
Maybe when you get to that age, you kind of let all of that stuff go. I don't know.
Well, and maybe that's part of it, you know, that, you know, as you're entering those twilight years, you know, what have you got to lose? You've been hurt once before. What, you know, does it matter if you get hurt again? I don't know. Yeah.
And the flip side to this, obviously, there are those concerns that if you were to reconnect, you know, there's obviously concerns there. But the flip side to that is that some of those old connections, and particularly if they were strong in the past, can endure. You know, what would it be about a relationship that could endure 60 years later, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. And I guess, you know, in the book I've questioned, like, do we have soulmates? Do we, you know, do you rely on fate? Is it, you know, what are those connections? I think, you know, that they were so bonded in, you know, their interests at university, in their love of each other, in a friendship, I think, that they developed first. And, you know, and maybe with those things, there's a common thread anyway. So even if they didn't pick up as they finished off as lovers, then, you know, perhaps they could still be friends. But yeah, and it's interesting because I think, you know, when you look back on relationships of past, you know, even we are, you know, you're a different person to who you were back then. You know, if your first love is happening in your late teens and early 20s, then you'd like to think that you've grown a little since then. But the feelings belong to that time, and they can feel so you know, as intense as they were back then. But you know, it's, I don't know. I've never gone back and rekindled an old flame, so I can't speak from experience.
No, I never have, and I don't think I'd be game enough to. And my husband is still very much in my life, so
it's all good.
Just yet. So. We've got a comment from Helen. She only had one living grandparent when she was born, and had a very, very special relationship with her maternal grandmother. The grandmother died 36 years ago, and she's put a typo in here, but she has corrected it in another comment, that there is not a day that goes by that she doesn't think of her. So,
it's so true. I'm the same with my grandmother's. I don't. It's a bit woo-woo, but they say that the spirits come to you at 11:11, you know, on a clock. So you look at clocks, and so if you see the numbers 11:11, and it's just, you know, I mean, it's silly and woo-woo, but it's, you know, you just say, you know, hi, thanks for dropping by, and then and then they go on with their day, and you go on with yours. So yeah, I'm the same. There's definitely a daily connection there that I enjoy. Yeah,
that's so sweet. There's also, so we've talked about a couple of the older connections within the book. There's also a very new connection that happens in the book, and that's with Beth and Nick, who is Jerry's great nephew.
Yeah.
And as we've touched on with Beth, she's a very structured person, quite a sensible person. So she doesn't really believe in fate and, you know, that sort of, as we said, woo-woo things. So she struggles with the fact that there seems to be an instant connection with Nick. She definitely knows she's feeling it, but she doesn't quite believe it or trust that it's a real thing. And I guess I wanted to ask you was being open to new connections, because that's part of Beth's journey, right, is being open to these new experiences. Is that something that you set out to explore when you started, or was that something that came through as you were writing it?
Yeah, I think it was, because I was really keen to look at this idea of fate and the role that fate plays in our life. And so, obviously the lotto win was a random act of fate, but then it set into train all of these different things that happened. And I liked the idea that, even before I sort of settled on that love theme, that I wanted her to be challenged continuously to do things that, she was really uncomfortable to do, but it was kind of the work of fate was pushing her towards this. And so I liked the idea that she she forms this connection sort of in spite of herself. It's like she really tries to not do it. And there's she can come up with a million reasons for why she shouldn't, but actually when it comes to matters of the heart, they're really inconvenient and they're very unpredictable and you can't schedule them. And that's exactly the sort of things in her life that she would normally shy away from. And she would normally seek out, we do learn a little bit about some previous relationships that she has had, and they have been very structured. And, it's been that sort of, there's been ground rules and there's been expectations and there've been, time frames and these sorts of things. Whereas, the relationship that she forms with Nick is messy and it's inconvenient, and it's also gorgeous and it's heartwarming and it's, really sweet, and they're all of the things that, she would normally intentionally shy away from. So I was rooting for her. I was rooting for the both of them.
Oh dear. I was rooting for them as well, because Nick is definitely somebody I would shack up with, like without question. He's totally gorgeous. But for Beth, it was a huge act of bravery, really, to open herself to that relationship with him, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think, watching her grandmother do it, must have played a role, I think, in having her be emboldened to that. I think, if your 82-year-old grandma can traipse halfway across the world to hook up with a old woman lover, then it probably gives you a bit of courage to, take a few risks yourself. So, and I think it was part of a journey that she was having, and she was shown at key points along the way. I think that maybe taking risks ain't so bad, and good things can come from that.
So I want to know, which part of Beth is you? Are you the very structured, very sensible person, or are you the brave and take life by the horns person?
No, not at all. I think I think Beth is who I'd like to be more of. So I'd like to be a bit more, confident and structured and, pragmatic and practical. And I wouldn't see myself like that. But there are parts of her, that are definitely me. She's quite disciplined and she's sort of, but no, there's more about her, I think, that's what I would aspire to be than actually a reflection of me. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right, we won't push that one any further. We reveal a bit too much of ourselves sometimes through our work.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
No, I certainly have. So.
Yeah, that's right.
There's also another connection, which isn't necessarily a human connection, that I wanted to touch on today, and that's predominantly with Elise and Jerry, but also into Beth. There's a very strong connection with nature for all three of those women. As you said, Elise and Jerry were both scientists in their day, and Beth is an environmental scientist as well. And I wanted to question you about that connection with nature, and why is it that a connection with nature is so special? And do you think, it's a two-pronged question, and do you think that we miss that now in our modern lives?
Yeah, and possibly it was also in response again to being locked up in my house. It was another one. It was another point where I live in a suburb, that's sort of our 5K radius got me just to the road that was on the edge of Port Phillip Bay, but if I abided by the rules, I couldn't actually get across. And so, I really valued nature during that time. And the first places we went to when we could was, into gardens and bush area and bushwalking and things like that. So I think, again, and I think you're right. I think we do miss it. And I think, we're probably not spending enough time outside, in the great outdoors, connecting with, the amazing and fascinating environment that we've got, literally on our doorstep for many of us in Australia, which we're so lucky for. But I also think that nature is, an incredible unifier of people. You can, there's so many different groups, whether it's professional or whether it's bushwalking groups or whatever, that you can kind of join. You've got a common element. You can come along if you're a bit socially awkward, or if you're, haven't quite found your tribe. I think it really does. I think those places provide an opportunity for people to feel belonging. And I think the other thing about spending time in nature too is that, it's a reminder, a very healthy reminder, that we are just one tiny piece of this amazing jigsaw puzzle of ecology that, we lose sight of sometimes, and it's easy to get carried away in our own lives. But actually, in the grand scheme of things, we are just one small part of an entire ecosystem. So yeah. And I think, having that be a bonding element between Beth and Elise was a convenient story thread. It was, it certainly offered that, but I was definitely hoping to have nature almost as another character. Yeah,
and particularly I think with Elise and Jerry, and it probably ties in with the title, which, as we said, is Birds of a Feather. Back in their younger days, Elise and Jerry connect quite strongly over the Goulding finch is something, and that, and their love of birds and their love of that particular storyline of the people that discovered the Goulding finch. Are you an ornithologist at all?
No, but I have worked for a long time in conservation agencies. So because I sort of work in comms, we're like 30-second experts on everything. So that's how I sort of feel about the Gouldian finch. But yeah, so the John and Elizabeth Gould thread was one that I was keen to weave into it. I just read Melissa Ashley's amazing book, The Birdman's Wife, and Elizabeth Gould, who accompanied her husband out to Australia while he did the ornithological survey. She was an incredible artist, but of course never got any recognition for it, and still to this day is an unsung hero of Australia's, early European scientific records. And I liked the idea that Elise and Jerry would have a really strong woman sort of role model to look up to. I liked that, they were role models in themselves, but then she also provided that kind of, it wasn't the next generation, it was actually sort of more like 100 years before. But yeah, I just thought it was a nice, I just thought her, Elizabeth Gould's story added an interesting dimension to that too. And actually, so John Gould named Gouldian finch after Elizabeth Gould after she passed away. She passed away quite young, shortly after they returned from Australia to England, and he named her the Gouldian finch in her honour because he thought it was the most beautiful bird in the world. And I thought that was really sweet, and that there was, who knew that old English scientists could be so romantic. And so again, it was just having that kind of unashamed romance in a natural history setting. I quite liked the idea of integrating that into the book as well. So it's a beautiful thing. And another connection, and I'm going to dance around this a little bit because I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't read the book, but there's a lovely moment of connection right at the very, very end to do with nature and the naming of things. And I'll just leave it at that because I don't want to spoil things. And that kind of had me at the end of the book going, yes. It's nice when you have a reaction like that to something in a book, I think. So well done on that one. Thank you.
Julie's here. Hi, Julie. Nice to see you here on Book Bites. Now, the next question I have is for you, Rhianna, but it's also for anybody watching. So I want to see some comments come through on this one. as we mentioned, Beth wins the lotto. She wins the second division prize. So it's not the multi-million dollars, but it's a decent amount of money, about 260,000 or so.
412, yeah. So 260.
And some cents. There was some cents in there as well.
Of course, they were for Beth, yeah.
21 cents, I think it was.
Yeah.
I don't want sensible answers to this question, though, right?
Yeah.
We all know that if we won a huge amount of money, that we would, do those usual things like pay off our mortgage, help our family, give to charity. I don't want those kind of answers, because I trust that you're all good people and that you would all do that.
Yeah.
What would you do frivolously, like go crazy, like just blow some money on something after you've taken care of all the sensible things?
Yeah.
What would you do, Rhianna?
So I reckon there's two things. So my kids are 11 and 13, and we took an amazing holiday last year. We were away for a month, and I just thought that was the most magic opportunity. So my first thing would be to whisk them away off somewhere, and if we can throw any kind of responsibility behind, I'd probably go for 6 months or something, and say, stuff school, we'll learn on the go, and we'll do that. So that would be the first thing. But also I have a rather guilty pleasure of shoes. So I think there would be some probably some investment in some shoes, I think, and maybe a nice storage system for the shoes. So that would be my frivolous response. Yeah.
Beth doesn't go silly with the money. She is very sensitive. Speaks to the nature and her personality. Yeah. She does buy herself one nice pair of shoes.
She does buy herself shoes, yeah.
I'm assuming you'd buy a few more than one pair?
Yeah, and they wouldn't be sensible ones either. They'd be as silly as possible, as high as possible, with as many bows and sequins and things as possible,
So if there's anyone out there watching that wants to share with us what they would do with, in a crazy way with their money, that would be fabulous. It's nice to think of every now and then, isn't it? Like, what would I do if...
Yeah, and I think it was sort of interesting coming up because I wanted the amount to be sort of life altering but not life changing. So you sort of you like I personally only ever buy lotto tickets in the $60 million draws, and those sorts of massive ones, and you think, oh, what would you even do? But with that kind of money, it's actually almost trickier to know how you would spend it, because then unfortunately that wouldn't pay off my mortgage. So it's
or anyone living in the city in Australia.
I'm going to be a really good help, but yeah.
Well, that's it. And hang on, we've got Julie's telling us what she's going to do. I haven't read it yet. She would get her son, who works in aviation, to organise a private jet to take their family somewhere delicious for champagne, oysters, and strawberry lunch, and some gorgeous island. And maybe we'd stay for a week. I think we should become adopted people of Julie's family, because that sounds like a good deal to me.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
So please win enough, Julie, that you can take Rhianna and me as well.
Right. Yeah.
And Beth doesn't tell her family when she wins the money. She does tell her grandma Elise, but she doesn't tell the rest of the family, because she's still trying to weigh up what she wants to do. She does tell Nick in London when she meets him. Who would you or not tell, Rhianna?
Yeah, that's a good one. Again, I really thought about this in terms of my own perspective. I don't think I'd tell many people, but there would be signs. But I don't know.
I've seen those memes on Facebook.
When I start clumping around in fancy shoes. But I think it would depend on how much I won. But I think I'd keep it a secret for as long as I could, I think, and then send out anonymous checks or something, I think, maybe.
I wouldn't tell anyone.
Yeah.
I would not be sharing that information with anyone. You'll just try to contact me and I won't be here anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Out of office.
Yeah. And then after 6 months, people go, where are they? What's happened?
Exactly. Yeah.
But good news, Julie will happily adopt us. Excellent.
Oh, good. Oh, thank you. That's good to know. Excellent. Yeah. You just let us know when you're ready.
All right, I'm going to wrap this up shortly, but before we do that, I'm just going to pop the details of where you can find Rhianna online. As a debut, Rhianna, what has been the best part of this journey for you?
I think I think it's been the support that I've received, both from, friends and family, from, the incredible writing community that Australia has, from, the incredible booksellers as well. The booksellers are the unsung heroes of all of this. I think, we are only as good as the people who stock our books. And I've had an opportunity to go around to a couple of bookstores and chat with them, and they're just so supportive and encouraging of Australian authors, and I just think that's amazing. I've had a fantastic experience with Affirm Press. I have nothing to compare it to, so but I just have felt so supported and so thankful for their wisdom and their guidance, and for publishing this book and putting it out there in the world. And also I've really received some really lovely messages from people that I have never met and, would have no reason to get in touch, but have just reached out to let me know that the book has resonated with them. And, I think it's a very confronting thing to put your work out like this into the world, but, to have it, be well received has been so lovely. And yeah, it's been a wild ride, but a fun one.
Well, I'm not surprised that it's been so well received, because it is just it's a bit of a book that's a bit like a warm hug, I think. That's probably the best way I can describe it. I was smiling a lot all the way through. There was a moment where I wasn't smiling, and again, no spoilers, I'll have words with you about that afterwards. And then that moment of woohoo at the end there, which was really good as well. Yvonne has weighed in on what she would do. She does not have a mortgage, so she would love to be able to go into state and stalk all of her favourite authors. Oh, that sounds like a pretty good deal. Yeah. So when we see Yvonne travelling around the country, we'll know that she's won the lotto.
At all the writers' festivals and things,
and every event she turns up at. So. Excellent. Thank you so much for joining me today, Rhianna. And again, here is the book, Birds of a Feather. As I said, it's a lovely warm hug of a read, and it really is just a nice little squeeze on the heart as well. Aww. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. And thank you for coming on and chatting. And I will see everybody next week on Book Bites. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. Thanks.